In the 1800s, dozens of Gothic castles appeared all around the country. We're told they were built as insane asylums, but could they be remnants of an older civilization? I actually do want to believe there's a historical cover-up of a pre-existing civilization. That would be awesome. These weren't asylums for crazy people. They were where they put everybody who remembered the old world civilization. Is there any evidence at all to support those theories? My grandmother was sent to one of these crazy asylums. She was subjected to these therapies like electric shock. But look at the building. Something doesn't add up. And once you start digging, the story only unravels further.
Who the hell knows? I'm just saying, without any evidence, why speculate?
I know that governments lie. I know that history is regularly wrong and fabricated. We need to have exactly what Tartaria people claim about it so that we can either prove or falsify their assertions. We're going to look at everything we can possibly find. Architects, notebooks, blueprints, financial records, newspapers. We're going to watch what JonLevi has to say about that Utah asylum. We're going to check out his assertions to see if any of these spooky asylums actually make sense or not.
I don't understand who's vibing with him.
90,000 views are vibing with him.
He sounds like Buffalo Bill.
We can't say that he sounds like a serial killer.
Allegedly.
There is a old world that's covered up. It's our world. It's what America was up to before things got so degraded and cheap. If all of the evidence converges to tell a coherent story, I'm challenging you now to be willing to accept what that implies.
The divine comedy is not lost on me that these people are suspicious about insane asylums.
Join us as we investigate the architecture of madness. All right, welcome to Inner World, everybody. How's it going? We got some serious stuff to get into today. I'm going to start this episode just like most Tartaria videos begin. All right, so let me pull up the screen share. Check out this crazy building, man. This is Toronto, 1850. We've got a 5-story stone palace, castle-like thing going on. It's got a dome. It's got these long wings, broad lawns. The style, you might think it's like a parliament building before you assumed it was a hospital. Okay, and then check this out. Another picture of the same asylum. Well, these are drawings, right? Not exactly pictures. Bam. This is a photograph from, I don't know the date on this one, but we're just checking it out. We're in Toronto here. And also, my grandmother actually was sent to one of these type of mental institutions, these crazy asylums in Nevada, Missouri in the 1960s. And this is actually kind of brutal because she was subjected to these crazy quote unquote therapies like electric shock treatments and stuff like that. It pretty much altered the course of her life in a way that she never recovered from. And if she was still around, I would ask her, I don't know, I think I would ask her about this building. It was said to have been demolished in the 1990s, but I might not even bring it up because it's some bad memories for her. Okay, so here's another one. This is Utah, outside the city of Provo, another castle for crazy people, or, you know, what society said was crazy people in the 19th century. 40 miles from Salt Lake City, this Utah asylum was remodeled until it was unrecognizable, and that happened in the 30s, across a couple of decades. And both this and the Toronto building we just looked at have been torn down, and so has the one in Nevada, Missouri. So all three of these are gone. If you are a Tartaria proponent, or at least a hidden North American civilization adjacent type person, you would say that these buildings were inherited and the asylum story was a cover. And after our last Tartarian episode, I would call it an escapade, about the 1893 World's Fair, people have just been sending me stuff left and right. You got to look at this. Got to look at that. This doesn't make any sense. This isn't proven. Check out the Encyclopedia Britannica from 1771. They say Great Tartary was like gigantic, right? So I am looking into things that viewers tell me is suspicious, but I can only do it one at a time. I can't just shotgun things and be like, yep, this is a conspiracy, the way most of the Tartaria theory videos do. We have to take this stuff to the fullest extent we can take it in terms of looking up the evidence. So, one thing that jumped out at me was this Utah asylum we're looking at right here. I remember seeing this probably 4 or 5 years ago when I was actually watching Tartaria videos, back when I was drinking the Kool-Aid. There was a JonLevi episode about it. And I am not arguing that these buildings aren't strange. They are very strange. They are crazy for the alleged purpose, at least on the surface. And I'm going to tell you, I know that governments lie. I know that history is regularly wrong and fabricated. So before you call me like a mainstream history shill or whatever kind of thing you might think about saying in the comments, it's just important that we look at the evidence together. So stick with me, okay? What I want to know and what we're doing here today is, does the asylums, our old world civilization cover up, does that whole wing of the Tartaria theory have any plausibility to it? Is there any evidence at all to support those type of theories? Does the surviving historical record about these structures behave like a cover story for inherited architecture or like a realistic, complicated record for structures that the 19th century America actually built, really did build? Okay, so here is 1888. The one that we looked at before that was 1896. So this is earlier, 1888, same building outside of Salt Lake City. And you can see that this building was, if these photos are real, it looks like, according to the record, as it says, this was built in stages and it was opened before it was fully finished. So the two pictures here, just right out the gate, support that story. Because you can tell, if you look over at the right side of the bigger building from 1896, you can see that it's the same thing in the earlier building. They just haven't added on to the rest of it, potentially. Okay, so that's obviously not a comprehensive enough test to know if this was real. So here are the things that we need to consider. A fake construction history to cover up the Tartaria thing would have to fake a lot more than just a date and a couple of paragraphs on Wikipedia. We're going to look at everything we can possibly find: architects, notebooks, blueprints, bids, financial records, newspapers, institutional annual accounting reports, even the records from professional conferences back in the day. We're looking at remodels, fires, demolitions, all this stuff. Pretty much the only way we could be more comprehensive is if I got on a plane or took a road trip and went to different states to go into the historical archive state by state and look at things that aren't digitized. I pretty much did everything short of that. So if we find things that are contradictory while we're looking at what we can find, we're going to consider that and be honest about it. But if all of the evidence converges to tell a coherent story, I'm challenging you now to be willing to accept what that implies, even if you are coming into this whole thing, as I once was, believing that the asylums are really old world buildings. So we're going to start at the Toronto Asylum, the one we looked at right out the gate, and we're going to check it against claims made by a popular Tartaria website and see if those claims are accurate or falsifiable. That building was the first one I looked at, and it really did feel kind of impossible at first glance, the way the theories suggest. But we're also going to go into Utah.
Can you clarify why that is? Like, I don't understand why you would think that's impossible. I just don't understand it.
Well, okay, so just quickly, but we're going to go straight into this. Toronto, if you just do a quick search for the time period this was built, it says it has a 30,000 population, and there's several big, grand buildings like this in Toronto at that time. So your first thought, and this is what a lot of the Tartaria videos will say, is like, how could a population that small have built buildings like that? Why would they build them? You know, that's the first thing. So that's the initial gut reaction. I'm not saying it's the right reaction. We're going to explore that. So we're going to look at the Utah one. We're going to watch what JonLevi has to say about that Utah asylum in a video that he did about it. We're going to check out his assertions the same way we did for the Toronto Tartaria website claims. And then after that, for the Plus members, we're going to widen the scope by looking at the history of mental health care in the 19th century in the aggregate to see if any of the reasons given by the mainstream narrative for why so damn many of these spooky asylums were built actually make sense or not. And in the process, we're going to see a lot more of them, and we are going to learn their stories. This is the architecture of madness. You can only get this stuff on Interworld. Let's go. All right, Dylan, you ready?
I mean, the divine comedy is not lost on me that these people are suspicious about insane asylums. And the thing that is interesting is it's like, so because Toronto only had 40,000 people, then why would they build that? But it's like, does everybody with that logic suppose that everybody who works in Manhattan lives in Manhattan? Have you ever heard of Ontario? Are you totally ignorant of the fact that the majority of Canada's population lives in that area even today? I don't know. To me, you haven't justified the impossible thing, but we'll just keep going. I'm just wondering why someone would think that's impossible, and the explanation is like embarrassing.
Hey, I'm plenty embarrassed that I used to buy this stuff, so I get it. It's like a vibe thing. Well, it's just vibes. They look at it and they're like, this feels weird and wrong. So let's go right into Toronto. This is where I started. I was actually looking into some other potential anomalies there from later, which we'll cover in a future episode. It doesn't fit into this one. And while I was looking through these old Toronto maps I found, I was just looking at so many maps. This one from 1851 really jumped out at me. I was like, aha, here is something at least a little crazy. You can see around the border, sketched around the border of this map, there's all these magnificent buildings that already existed in Toronto in 1851. And like I said, I did a quick Google search. First thing I checked was, what is the population of Toronto in 1850? And it's 30,775. And so I'm like, this is totally weird. Why in the world would a city of that size need buildings like this? And this is how the Tartaria thing starts. And especially that enormous, like humongous lunatic asylum on Queen Street. It is really big. I personally live in a city of about 170,000, but then I started thinking about how there's 500,000 in the broader metropolitan area. But even still, we don't have buildings of that caliber. And that's another one of the things that makes this whole study, I think, grab people's interest, is like, what was being done in the 19th century versus architecture that's built now. It's crazy. You know, if there is a old world that's covered up, it's our world, right? It's what America was up to before things got so degraded and cheap, right? I brought it up last episode, the central banking situation, the stealing of wealth. But I'm going to be honest, I actually do want to believe there's a historical cover-up of a pre-existing civilization. That would be awesome. That would be super fun to talk about. But we can't just take anybody's word for it. So looking at this map around the border, I think any of these buildings would make an interesting study, historical investigation-wise. You have St. Lawrence Hall, the City Hall, the Bank of North America, St. Andrews. A lot of really cool-looking stuff going on in Toronto here.
You know what I forgot?
And then right down here.
I just remembered. So in this conspiracy world, these were the people that were saying like the steeples were like energy transmission, free energy transmitters or some shit like that, right?
That's one of the many branches of this whole thing.
It's all coming back.
Yeah. I might just chase down all of this stuff, honestly. It's interesting.
Grift.
So yeah, grifting for the mainstream historical narrative. There we go. So yeah, here's a few more of the buildings around the border. And some of them are pretty amazing. Osgood Hall looks like it would be pretty cool to check out. I think, if I recall correctly, it's not in my notes, but off the top of my head, same architect did this Osgood Hall, as did the Asylum, allegedly. The first thing I found when I started looking into the map itself, which is called the 1851 Fleming-Scobie Topographical Plan, is that the guy who drew it, Sir Sanford Fleming, later became one of the main dudes who advocated for or like figured out how to do worldwide standard time. So this guy is one of the people who made it happen that the whole world gets divided into 24 time zones and we get the synchronized standard 24-hour clock. Now, again, I get the incorrect cosmology of the globe, right? But the time zone system seems like it was genuinely useful because before Fleming and his crew, people were just basing their clocks on where the sun's at in their town. So departure and arrival times became a logistical nightmare now that trains were starting to become really widespread. So the system was implemented by this guy, and he's the dude who drew that map we just looked at. Pretty cool.
And it's useful, but it's already been debunked on that. It doesn't work for the whole Mercator projection map.
No, right. It was useful. It was like a Band-Aid, but there's something better that could happen. But I think they keep it around because it's part of the globe.
It's useful where the population matters the most.
So I kept looking into the map, the Sanford Scobie map, and I realized that the ornamental border depicting the grand buildings was actually said to have been a promotional flourish to help sell the map and help sell people's interest to come to Toronto. The same publisher, Scobie, published this famous lithograph we're looking at here of the Asylum, which falsely depicts the building as closer to the lake than in reality. And it's basically showing it in an idealized manner. Now, one thing I want to say is there's a lot of footnotes and citations, and some of the things I'm saying have specific sources. If you go to, if you join my Plus membership on Substack or on my website or on Patreon, I have, it looks like 41 citations in the bibliography. And it's all footnoted and stuff, so you'll be able to find where I'm getting this stuff. The whole paper trail. So I'm questioning the necessity of such grand structures for such a small population at first, but then I looked into Canada West. Toronto was the institutional center of Canada West. This little bitty green spot here, not that big geographically at all. And at the time period, even though Toronto was like 30,000 people, this area was 952,000. So there's your answer. Why would you have buildings like this? It's called a capital. This is the capital. The whole purpose of having a capital is to centralize your institutional buildings in one spot. So
and
now,
it's like this in every major city of that era.
Yeah, exactly. So there's nothing suspicious
I just don't know
about
why New York, Boston, Connecticut, like all these, Rhode Island, I don't understand why all these other cities aren't being counted, looked at, And I think it's probably because if you start looking at the older parts of America, you see that everything lines up. And then it No, man, I've been sent stuff from everywhere. Like they're telling me that buildings that were built in like the 30s, and there's construction photographs all throughout. They're like, it's a fake record. It was already here. Well, I think we're seeing the necessity of those asylums, and in, there's like 70,000 plus homeless people in Los Angeles. And one of the reasons is because, was it during the 80s or whatever, they got rid of the asylums. So it's like, it's a twofold problem because you have these indigent people that need to be in asylums, but then you have the people who work in the asylums becoming callous to having to deal with these problematic people, and then they start abusing them. They also start seeing that nobody actually comes for them, so they can start experimenting on them. And it's a catch-22. You know what I mean? Like there's no good side to it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's part of what we'll get into in the latter half is what, like the philosophy of dealing with mentally ill people and how that evolved through the 19th century. So do you have the notes up, Dylan?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I was saying I don't have them on my computer, but I can pull them up on my text.
I was going to see if you would be down to read this article that I copied into here from Tartaria Britannica. And I want to include it in full because
I don't want to read any of these modern people's work because I don't want to be clipped out of context. I have a reputation to maintain and people could embarrass me with that. So I don't want to read anybody's work on this, but I'll read your work, whatever, like any of that shit. But
okay. Understood. Okay. So here is 999 Queen Street, the West Lunatic Asylum. The main reason we're looking at Toronto, I had the great pleasure of discovering a website called Tartaria Britannica.
Is that sarcasm?
It's really, I loved it. So it happens to have an article on this very asylum by an author called Tartaria Canada. It's actually their only article on the site. So we're looking at this site because even though it might be silly, we need to have exactly what Tartaria people claim about it on the record so that we can either prove or falsify their assertions. So if anyone's not super well versed in the lore, as we talked about, these asylums are one of the most common targets for their videos because they're large, architecturally crazy looking, yada yada. We've gone over that. So I'm going to read this article. Okay, so quote begins, officially, the Toronto Lunatic Asylum opened in 1850, designed to house just 500 patients. But look at the building. Massive wings stretch outward. A domed centerpiece towers above, and its sheer size suggests it could hold far more than the records claim. If it was truly built for so few, then why did it look like it could hold thousands? Okay, so first paragraph, I'm just going to let him know, whoever wrote this, the domed centerpiece is called a water tower. It has a function. It's there for a good reason. Something doesn't add up. Either the asylum was crowded for far beyond its reported capacity, or the official story is leaving something out. And once you start digging, the story only unravels further.
And by the way, the reason you need the water up high like that is how you get water pressure.
Yeah, it's a big building. They have a lot of water needs. This wasn't some small, cramped institution. It was a fortress. The central building had multiple wings stretching outward, standing 4 or 5 stories high. With multiple floors and sprawling wings, the real capacity wasn't 1,362. It was easily 2,500, maybe more. If dormitory-style housing was used, it could have held over 3,000. So why claim it only held 1,362 patients? Was it just a bureaucratic number? Something clean for the records? If the real number was much higher, were those extra patients deliberately unaccounted for? Were they shuffled between institutions, hidden under different classifications? Or something worse? Bum, bum, bum.
Now that's actually something that could be plausible, right? Like
fudging
numbers to get more money from the government to, you know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing,
lying about
Dylan.
patients so that you can make some of them disappear or, whatever, harvest organs. Who the hell knows? I'm just saying, without any evidence, why speculate?
I think it's even fair to speculate that some stuff happened behind these walls that wasn't pretty. That's fine. But
100% it does.
But here's the thing. It's not explicitly stated in this article, but he's writing for Tartaria people, right? So I think it's implied because I've heard it in so many videos that cover the asylums. Their favorite thing to say about it is these weren't asylums for crazy people. They were where they put everybody who remembered the old world civilization. Kept them in these. I'm serious. This is where they rounded all the people up who still remembered the old world and talked about it and threw them in the asylum to keep them separate from everybody else so that the memory of Tartaria would be forgotten. It's not said in this article, but I have heard that said more than one time. This is like bread and butter. Okay, so continuing Tartaria Britannica's article. The official story says they built it in the mid-1840s and opened it by 1850, just like that. But wouldn't a building of this scale with intricate stonework and a domed centerpiece, water tower, take decades to complete? Where are the detailed blueprints, the financial records, the workforce logs? You'd think a project this big would leave a paper trail, but it's oddly thin. Bringing the screen share back up, above the paragraph where he says, where are the blueprints? He has a picture of blueprints. Like,
what is it with these people? Didn't we just deal with this last episode?
Yes, it is exactly the same thing as the McCoskey thing. Like saying this information doesn't exist and then citing the information later. But here it's just right next to each other. It's wild. It's wild. It's like, I guess in his mind, these are not detailed enough blueprints, maybe. But this is how blueprints tended to look at this era. So continuing, we got to get through this article. It gets worse. And here's the other thing. John George Howard had no prior experience designing anything at this scale, yet he supposedly masterminded one of the grandest public buildings in Upper Canada. Convenient. isn't it? The contradictions don't stop there. A military map from 1850, see below, shows that the land wasn't even officially leased until March 17th, 1848. So how were there already buildings years earlier? Government projects don't work like that. No one builds on land they don't own. So what was really happening in the mid-1840s?
Hold on, he said, so how are they already building years earlier? Not how were there already buildings?
My
they were
bad.
already building on the leased land.
Yeah, I misread that. Government projects don't work like that. No one builds on land they don't own. So what was really happening in the mid-1840s? Either the timeline is wrong, or the asylum wasn't new construction at all. Was something already standing here before the asylum was ever part of the plan?
By the way, I love how you're reading in this voice to avoid the landmine of you being clipped out of context. Motherfucker, you were going to let me take that fall on that grenade.
I just was trying to get a break from my voice, but now I'm having double duty having to do this tough guy voice. All right, this is my favorite paragraph.
You should do Batman next.
The hidden meaning of 999. The asylum sat at 999 Queen Street West, a number that seems almost too fitting for a place built to hold those society wanted forgotten. In numerology, 999 represents endings, hidden knowledge, and transformation. It marks the closing of a cycle, the moment before something is wiped away or reborn. A fitting number for a site with an erased past. But 999 is the inverse of 666. In esoteric thought, inversion is rarely meaningless. Was this number a coincidence or a deliberate reversal? A marker of something obscured? If 999 signals the end of one cycle, what came before it? And what was erased to make way for the asylum? Well, we're going to look at this. I think it's a template. I think it's like a successful template. It gets views, so they just do the same type of questions and assertions, and then they just pick a different building and redo it, same exact thing. And it keeps succeeding. Okay, home stretch on this article. A historical map from 1850 of Toronto's military reserves reveals something the official story leaves out. The asylum wasn't just built on military land. It was part of a larger military reserve that included Fort York and new barracks. This means the site had a strategic purpose long before it became a hospital. If the land was already in military use, was the asylum truly a new construction? Or was an existing structure repurposed? And if so, who built it? Just saying the same thing over again. Toronto has a habit of burying its past, literally. Underground tunnels crisscrossed the city, and older buildings were often repurposed rather than built from scratch. Before the asylum, what stood here? A military post? A hospital? Or something else entirely, something history erased. And if the numbers don't add up, neither does what happened next. In 1975, the entire structure was wiped off the map. No historical preservation, no repurposing, just gone. Buildings of this scale usually outlive their original purpose, but this one was erased completely. Were they just making way for modern development? Or was there something inside that couldn't be left standing? A building this big, this important, with so many people passing through it should have a long, detailed record. But when you start looking, the gaps are bigger than they should be. The numbers don't match. What numbers? Tell me. The construction timeline doesn't make sense. Explain why. And the land it stood on? That might have its own story that nobody's telling. We know what they say it was, but before it was an asylum, it was military land. So what exactly was here? And why was it erased?
So does the military own the land, Canada. Or does the government own the land? Is the military owned by the government, or is the military its own entity?
Well, it's a colony at the time. We're going to get into all this.
It's really frustrating. There's a
paper trail. There's a paper trail about this. You can find out. Okay.
At the end of the day, the other thing that's frustrating is that history is seldom written by the people who lived it. So just because there's not a clear history doesn't mean certain things didn't happen, right? And trying to manufacture what happened is just as bad, right? We see that all the time where people say this happened and there's no evidence of that. But if you've got a structure, just because you don't have a historical record on how it was built doesn't mean people didn't build the structure when it roughly looks like it was dated to or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much weird thoughts going on here that don't make any sense.
Yeah, and even though it was painful and I had to do that stupid voice, which I think was actually pretty fitting, we needed to look at this because this is a great example of what Tartaria videos and articles are like. It pretty much fits the general pattern. Okay, so here is how you examine something like this. We're giving you, I learned this in doing this process. I got way better at the whole falsification thing. So let's look at the big questions this article asks. Some of them repeated over and over again. What are the claims? What's relevant? What's falsifiable? Falsifiable matters because if it's not falsifiable, if you cannot prove it, whether or not that's wrong, it cannot be made as an argument. There's no way to check. So it's pointless, right? It's like saying, what we said before last Thursdayism. The universe actually began last Thursday. And they, whoever made the simulation was able to just make it look like it had a history that went back further. Can't check. We have no way to check that. Okay, so here's the stuff that the article says. 1, this was a fortress, not an institution. I think that's hyperbole, not a claim, leaving that out. 2, the real capacity wasn't 1,362. It might have been over 3,000. Okay, so this actually has an explanation we're going to go into more later. So I'm not going to address it in this segment, but in general, the practice at the time in terms of mental health care intended to keep populations uncrowded as part of the therapy. And if you never watched the Plus video, just look up the Kirkbride plan. This is what the entire system was based on. 3, they built it too fast from the mid-1840s to 1850, but the scale, stonework, and domed centerpiece should have taken decades to complete. Falsifiable. It's completely falsifiable and relevant. All right, hey, will you read 4 through 10? Read those for me.
Yeah, and also, I need to reiterate, there's a literal plan on why you wouldn't want the mental health institutions crowded. A literal plan named after a guy who created it. So, you know what I mean? Like, how disingenuous are these people?
And the plan itself also indicates the architectural style.
Yeah.
Like, it's everything is in that.
Anyways, number 4, one of the claims is that there was an oddly thin paper trail, misleading, quote unquote, detailed blueprints, financial records, workforce logs. This is going to be falsifiable.
Yeah, missing detailed blueprints.
Missing detailed blueprints, yeah. Number 5, the other claim was that George Howard designed it, but had no prior experience designing anything at this scale. This, again, is another falsifiable claim that Chance will debunk. Number 6, the claim was that the land wasn't officially leased until March 17th, 1848, but they were already building years earlier. Again, falsifiable. Number 7, the claim was that 999 Queen Street secretly might mean 666, upside down, proof they're hiding something. This 8th claim, the asylum was built on military land. Again, this is falsifiable. Number 9, gaps in the historical record of this building are bigger than they should be. Chance says we will look at this. We'll see if he keeps his word, but it's an unspecific statement. So what should they be? Number 10, the claim is that the construction timeline doesn't make sense. I guess that's falsifiable too. We'll see.
A lot of this is super subjective, right?
And zesty.
So when we say falsifiable, to be clear, that list, we're not saying all those claims were false. We're saying that the ones that are falsifiable means we can check whether or not they're true or false, or at the very least, if they can be disproven. So taking them one at a time. Was it built too fast? Should it have taken decades? Okay. The first piece that I want to bring up, and this isn't necessarily about how fast it was built, but it does tell us a good idea of when it was started, or at least a general time period. The cornerstone was laid on August 22nd, 1846, according to the public historical record, by Chief Justice John Beverly Robinson. The asylum opened on January 26th, 1850. That means the building took about 3.5 years. The ceremony left physical evidence behind. I love this. A pair of engraved silver plaques was sealed into the cornerstone in one of those spooky Masonic rituals. They were recovered when the building was torn down in 1976. Photography of it online wasn't great. I had to take this from a YouTube video from the museum, but you can still see the inscription at the bottom left is the name of the governor, Charles Theophilus Metcalfe, the Baron Governor of the entire colony of Canada at that time. Accurate to the time period it is said to have been built in. So if this is a real artifact, it kind of just answers the was it really built by the Toronto people at that time in one shot. Like this artifact, if real, game over. Here is also, I found this at the same time, a silver presentation trowel from 1846 was supposedly inscribed as a gift to be given to Chief Robinson, Chief Justice. It was like, he was the guy that got to lay the cornerstone, so they gave him this as a memorabilia, right? So in the diagram below, the bold area is what we're told was actually completed in 1850. The wings were added between 1866 and 1870. Okay, so the bold area is this part of the building, and then the wings, they're the wings, right? And these were said to have been designed by Kivas Tully, who went on to become Ontario's chief provincial architect. And that's different guy than J.G. Howard. J.G. Howard drew up the original plans. This guy Tully finished the wings. The grand portico, which is like the columns and stuff in the front entryway, in this design was never built at all. And that is exactly what you might expect to happen with an ordinary public project constrained by budget. So I don't think it's weird that the drawings and the building are not identical, right? Like this is what we hope to do, and then there was the reality.
By the way, this is very common architecture to the time, especially with large estates. I mean, all you have to do is go look at these old mansions, and a lot of them are laid up like this. I think, what do they call it? Is it called bat wings or something like that? There's a name for it.
Bat wings, baby. Yeah, and the bat wings thing is literally the Kirkbride plan that I was talking about. We'll go into details, but like they're all over the place. They built them like this on purpose for a very specific reason. Now, the built too fast part, that is subjective. There's a lot of variables to that. I figured the best way to reckon would be to look at a similar construction project or a few from around the same time period. And I thought at the time that I was in this part of the research, it was difficult to judge that. As I'm realizing now, I could revise this because I went a lot further after I wrote this paragraph and realized that, I found everything from built in a year to built in like 25 years, just depending on funding and stuff and the size.
Bro, I've personally witnessed in Los Angeles, I forget the name of it, but it was on the Avenue of the Stars. I used to work at this place for like 6 years. I personally witnessed them build a magnificent set of skyscrapers. I think it was 2, it might have just been 1, right next to where I worked, inside of like 2 to 3 years. Way more magnificent than this.
And that's with all the red tape of California in that day, too. You know, we don't have that kind of red tape.
And it's crazy because every day you just see people walking, doing like you hear stuff, and it just happens so gradually, but it's every day, you know, and eventually it's just like it takes form and it's crazy.
Okay, so as I said, I found hospital projects from around this time, mental hospital projects, a lot of them similar in scope. A lot of them were built in a year or two. I'm just not even going to claim authority in building or architecture. So we'll just give it inconclusive. Even though it was subjective, he never said what constitutes too fast, what would be correct, or what's his source for this statement. You know, none of that is given, but we'll say
that would be dismissed. If this is a court and I was the judge, no, that can't be admitted. You're not specific. You're not giving claims. You're just being arbitrary.
Yeah, it's just an emotional claim. And so they don't get a point for that. And I'll be generous. I won't even take the point here. No one gets a point. I also found the actual planning process began in 1835. So that's actually a pretty long institutional gestation period, 10 years. Maybe it's not super fast after all. The build from 1845 to 1849, I found corroborated a second time, or maybe third, in the Dictionary of Canadian Biography, or Biographies. And it says that this was an immense building executed in the local white brick that Howard, the architect himself, had introduced into Toronto practice. Another pretty oddly specific detail for a forged history to bother with.
Did they say what the white brick is made of by any chance?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I don't think I included that in the article. But I'm sure that's not super hard to find out. What white brick Toronto, 1850s. Now, how about the oddly thin paper trail? No detailed blueprints, no financial records, no workforce logs, that whole claim. Again, thin, subjective, but I think we should answer this claim pretty easily. I think it just requires a decent amount of records and it's no longer thin. Okay.
Got it, Chance. White bricks are made of kiln-fired clay or pressed concrete, so they can be manufactured very easily and in abundance.
There you go. So remember the Tartaria article, in the very paragraph that is said there's no detailed blueprints, immediately above that paragraph, there was a picture of the blueprints we just looked at. Get out of here.
What is going on?
I don't know. It is that's why I was calling this episode Architecture of Madness, because it's architecture for insane asylums. And for some reason, this architecture itself is making people crazy to this day.
Maybe they're homesick, like from a time they're like, man, I need to go back to there. I want to go back.
So here I found more blueprints, digitized copies of records kept in the Toronto Public Library. Even got the reference location and everything. Okay, so here's the grounds, drawing of the grounds by Howard. Here's the upper floor and attic, again, from Howard, the architect. And here's the basement and ground floor. I don't know about you, but I think we just found detailed blueprints that shows the grounds and both floors and the attic. So I think we can write that one off. The next part of the claim is about financial and administrative records. Okay. That one was a little harder to wrangle. I found a 2019 dissertation called Toronto's Provincial Lunatic Asylum in Context by Maximilian Smith. On page 100, you can look this up. You can get a PDF of his dissertation. Page 154 to 155, he writes, Ritchie won the contract for the construction of the Provincial Lunatic Asylum in 1846 with a tender of 32,934 pounds. The final cost of the unfinished asylum building was 75,146 pounds, exceeding Ritchie's initial tender by more than 40,000 pounds and 3 years. So I have in the Substack article in the show notes that you can find if you're a member, the exact location screenshotted of where these records exist in the Archives of Ontario records. According to this dissertation, I'm going to guess he probably went and checked because this is a guy doing his PhD dissertation. Probably wouldn't fake his sources, but who knows? I can't go check. I can't go to Ontario. So
it's also crazy how people would be probably offended if you called it a lunatic asylum now. And I think if, the real conspiracy is not being able to call a spade anymore. So you can't talk about things. And I think that's one of the things that's dumbing down everybody's, because they have to change how they express everything. And sometimes it's just easier to not pass on info because it's like, I don't even want to deal with the consequences of people getting riled up.
My wife just told me everything is made of brick in Toronto. She used to live there. So cool. I'd like to go check it all out.
It's beautiful. I mean, there's, unfortunately, because of the political disposition of Canadians, it's kind of a dump, but you can tell there's some beautiful spots there, beautiful parks too.
Yeah. So anyway, maybe those records are fake. I can't tell you, but someone in Toronto could go check at Archives of Ontario and find out if there are really records there. I have a feeling they really are. So we have from this a contractor, John Ritchie. He was an alderman of the time, and I bet that there's more detailed blueprints in those archived records too. This also tells us the original tender, which is an old-timey word for what you would call a bid in today's lingo. The tender was targeting completion. They bid that they could complete it in 1847. And per the record, the completion date in 1850 would have actually been 3 years late. So maybe the built too fast claim has it backwards and it's actually slower than it could have been. Who knows? But Howard, the architect, his journals have information about how he designed a row of shops and a hotel for this same guy, John Ritchie, back in 1834. So they'd been working together before at this point. So again, there's so much, like, I tried to include everything that seemed relevant, but there's so much interconnected detail and records of these people in this history. It's like, the only way you can believe the claims in the Tartaria article is if you just don't look at all.
And this is like thoroughly debunking the claim that no one had the experience to do this, right?
Yeah, and I'm actually about to take that one. That claim that he was an inexperienced nobody architect, I'm going to spank that claim right now, okay? So I found a collection of the architect, J.D. Howard, his journals, notebooks, plans, cash books, all of that stuff is held by the Toronto Public Library in a collection room called the Baldwin Room. You'd have to go there in person to see most of this stuff because it's such a bulk of old records. It is not weird that they're not digitized. There's so much held in storage, not digitized, for about all kinds of things. The sheer bulk of bureaucratic paperwork is crazy. And they keep a lot of it. It's, old dudes like my dad like to go look at this stuff. I'll be one of those guys one day. Just you watch.
They're called archives for a reason.
Yeah. Also, there's a book called The Biographical Dictionary of Architects in Canada, and it cites Howard's journals and dates them. That same dictionary entry locates his Brockville courthouse drawings from in the Baldwin Room. I misspelled that in my notes. Let me show you. This is the Brockville courthouse. And apparently there's drawings of this in the same collection. Tartaria people would probably tell you this is an old world building. So if these records really physically exist in the archives, and this doctoral dissertation citing it is real, and this Dictionary of Architects in Canada is real, if all that is true, then this claim is falsified of a oddly thin paper trail. I think it's hard to believe that somebody would fake a 400-page dissertation about this asylum in 2019 just to cover up Tartaria. Seems unlikely to me. I
would say this. I would have much more respect for the author of that article if they went to the archive, right? Took pictures of, or maybe recorded something and was just like, hey, I tried to go there. There's nothing available. And they were super sketch when I was trying. You know what I mean? Like if there was even
that would change the whole game.
That would change my opinion.
Absolutely. I've yet to see that.
So I guess this is a lesson for all of us though, right? Because what if that person did have a valid claim? And I'm just playing devil's advocate. You completely undermine yourself by not having that thoroughness to back your efforts up. Completely undermine yourself. You are the boy that cried wolf at this point.
Yes, and it makes everyone else that might want to talk about a real conspiracy or a real historical cover-up look bad. It ruins the whole genre of historical revisionism, which that affects us, Dylan. They are hurting us.
Well, yeah, because it's offensive because I really do feel like this whole thing was getting in the way of my work. And I have put forth incredible amount of work talking about empires that have actually been covered up. But unlike these people, I provide the architectural evidence. I provide the linguistic evidence, the language, the tombs, the archaeological evidence, everything. And these people don't do that. But this is the sensational bullshit that's taking over the internet, and it's drowning out what I believe is way more important work.
Absolutely. Okay, so as I was saying, we're about to get to, the record of Howard's journals falsifies the claim that he had no prior experience designing anything at this scale. Of course, at this scale, maybe a little subjective. He is credited with designing the Bathurst, Perth, Ontario, Bathurst District Courthouse and Jail. This was in 1842. We're looking at that right here. Brockville, Johnston District Courthouse and Jail. Sorry, that's the one we're looking at right now. That was from 1842 to 1844. And so these two we're looking at right here. These two were both before the asylum. I think they're pretty similar. They are multifunctional institutional buildings that combine a need for security, administration, public function, all of the above, keeping people in. The guy was apparently really busy and not a novice. So he did a lot more after this, I'm sure. There's another inconvenient detail to Tartaria theory, which I love because this is also recorded. There's documentation. He got this job in the first place to design the asylum by winning it in an open competition. The city apparently held a competition for anyone that could help design public buildings architecturally. And not only did he win that competition, he won 6 competitions like it across the province in his lifetime. But the asylum was the only winning design that actually got built. So I think a cover-up needs a willing patsy, right? If they're going to pin it on this guy and be like, he built it, he's the patsy for it for some reason, he needs to go on living his life, creating the illusion that he really designed this building that already existed, I guess. Or they just put it out there retroactively and pinned it to him. I don't know. But a competition requires competitors, judges, published results. All of that generates paperwork, and that's a paper trail, not a thin record. The Tartaria theory says that does not exist or it is fake. So at this point, I don't think we even need to keep going with debunking Tartaria Britannica, but let's just be thorough. Let's be the opposite of them. Claim number 6.
Real quick, does this person put their name on the line, or are they just fucking yeah?
It's just Tartaria Canada.
And that's the pattern, people. Anonymous internet trolls, and there may be a psyop to this. There may be what if this was the Russia collusion? Remember back then? It was like the Russia.
I don't know, man.
It turns out this is to make Americans
a lot of this
dumb
gets
as fuck.
traction on TikTok, and did when TikTok was a Chinese thing.
Oh, they're going to go really stupid. So, claim 6. Land not officially leased until March 17th, 1848, but they were already building years earlier. Per the Fort New York researchers, in May 1845, HM Board of Ordnance granted them a 50-acre property on Queen Street, west within the military reserve. The Ontario Heritage Trust's own file adds that in 1844, 78 acres in the Ordnance Reserve were donated for a mental asylum. So the military authority, the Board of Ordnance, an imperial body separate from the provincial civil government, authorized the site for asylum use in 1844 to 45, a year or more before the cornerstone was laid. Construction proceeded under that authorization. A separate, later, formally registered lease document, dated March 1848, probably represents the paperwork catching up to the arrangement. Standard practice when land is moving between two different arms of 1840s colonial government, military versus civil, in parentheses, across an ocean from the ultimate authority in London. That convenient detail gets left out, right? The fact that Canada is property of the crown. This looks like expected bureaucratic lag, not a contradiction. This claim is satisfactorily falsified. Claim 8, that the asylum was built on military land, is shown to be true, but that in itself means nothing to the larger claim of a Tartaria cover-up. 1 point I'll concede, and that's chance, 1 point he'll concede to the history is a lie camp, because I don't disagree with that premise to an extent. 2 sources give different acreage to the site. One says 50, one says 78. My best guess is a grant versus donation measurement difference or mistake between 2 arms of a colonial bureaucracy. But it's an inconsistency in the record, which I said I would address when I found. It's a very small detail, though, and not evidence of a cover-up. And I'll just go to say, when I look at my ancestors' birth records and all that stuff, some of them say they came here in 1888. Some say 1885 or something. There's always going to be mistakes in the historical record. It doesn't mean it's a cover-up. It might mean there's some lying or, fibbing going on for whatever reason. Who knows, But it's super common for that to happen.
Yeah, and so to reiterate, they're saying in Tartaria, Canada, the land was not leased until 1848, but they were already building years earlier. Suspicious. Okay. What I found, and this is the kind of thing that is super well documented, right? Land agreements, titles, deeds, things like that, that it was actually donated earlier. And then the lease document, the formal lease document happened later. So again, paperwork catching up to the arrangement doesn't seem that crazy.
And I don't think we need to address the 999 thing because I definitely think it is not an accident. I probably would think there is a spiritual / ritualistic / cult reason for that, but it's not indicative of that means it was, a cover up or an ancient site. You know what I mean? It's just like, yeah, whoever built that, assigned that, that's obviously a numerology thing.
I would be inclined to agree with you in a lot of cases, and I don't know. Devil's our advocate, though.
Unless you can find 998 different numbers before that, I would say he's correct in that, but it doesn't mean anything anything he said doesn't guarantee, or she said, doesn't guarantee it means any of the shit that was speculated.
Right. All I'll say is there's the buildings around that area, they continue with that numbering convention, and it's a big city, so getting to 999 might be reasonable. We can't know they were Freemasons, right? They did a whole treasure in the capstone ritual thing. Like, who knows?
Again, it just depends. Are there numbers? Are there enough buildings, and that just is coincidence? Then it might be just coincidence. But if there aren't that number, then I can see that some people do that.
In my own town, there's I found 4 999s in my town. One of them is a Walgreens. Is that an occult ritual?
Yes. There's a Tartaria time machine in the basement of Walmart. Let's go.
No, but I will say something weird is there's a thing called the Springfield Underground in my town. And it's this giant 3 million square foot underground building system that they say is used for warehouse space for local businesses. Underground tunnels and stuff like this, including in Toronto, which I maybe look into later, are a big talking point for Tartaria theories. I have not looked into it closely. I think it seems weird. There's a lot of open space above ground in my town. All
major cities have super vast tunnel networks.
Right, and that's literally they're covering up the underground city. That's the theory from Tartaria. We're going to look into it at some point, but I found it like a funny coincidence, like a wink from God, that I should keep looking into the subject. The fact that when I was like, are there any 999s in my town? I got Springfield Underground, which is like the most mysterious thing in my whole town. Anyway, in 1979, after the asylum was demolished, they changed the street number from 999 to 1001, and it was to shed the stigma. It wasn't to shed the stigma of 666, but actually in Toronto at the time, 999 Queen was like slang for calling somebody crazy. So they wanted to, because it was such a famous building. Yeah, right? 999 Queen.
All you Tartaria people are 999 Queens. Zesty 999 Queens. Woo! There it is. I'm fucking titling my video for this like that.
Okay, but I did find something cool that has to do with 999 aside from the street address, and it stood out to me. If you look at the document, the map that shows this lease, and I'll zoom in on it, there's this little box pointing to the 50 acres, and then under it says, the portion edged green is leased to the corporation for 999 years. From the 17th of March to 1848. I was like, hey-oh, that's a weird number to lease something. Who's going to be alive?
So that's might be why that's like that's the significance, right?
I don't know if that has anything to do with them picking 999 for the address. I cannot say. I couldn't find anything about that. But I did think it was weird that they would lease it for 999 years. So I looked into it. And I found that it's actually pretty standard practice in English property law. Basically, this comes down to the difference between a lease and a freehold grant, or like allodial title in common law. And this distinction about who retained ultimate title and what authority was needed to convey it is what this has to do with. So a 99-year term was like a traditional ceiling for what counted as a normal but not perpetual, like not eternal lease. Beyond that, 999 years was a standard number lawyers would use when they wanted something to basically be like a totally permanent, heritable, like you can inherit it, it's mortgageable. It's basically equivalent to ownership for any practical human timescale permanently, but it's still technically a lease and not a grant, a freehold grant. In other words, when you find something that's been given a 999-year lease, it's basically the authority saying, this is you own this permanently, but technically the crown still owns it. You know what I mean? They're not giving it to you in allodial title, but they're letting you have it. And they're never going to bother you about it. So not actually that weird, kind of a cool thing. And the next part, we're almost through this thing, man. Gaps in the record are bigger than they should be. This is too vague to be truly falsifiable since we have no established baseline for should be, but gaps seem ordinary to me in a historical timeline. Lost records are probably true for virtually any 1840s institution, but there were enough things in the public archives for a doctoral dissertation about the establishment. I don't know. The gaps feel big, quote unquote. That just isn't doing it for me. I think it all checks out.
Yeah, and it's tough because paper rots, man. You know, so it's like if it's not carefully preserved, like hoping paper lasts over 100 years, and it's hard to make that happen if it's not in a good environment.
Yeah. I think also the construction timeline doesn't make sense. It's the same level of claim, not specific enough. Why doesn't it make sense? And I think we've made pretty good sense of the construction timeline. We've at least showed what it was. And later, when we look at other buildings of this sort and how they were built, this will seem very in line with what else is said to have been going on around North America at the time. So at first, what seemed strange, a huge asylum for a relatively small city population, is not as weird as it looks. From what I could find, and I confirmed this actually later, this was the sole state-supported lunatic asylum in Upper Canada until a second opened in London, Canada, 1870. So for a long time, like 20 years? This served almost 20 years. It served a province of nearly 1 million people, and it is said to have housed less than 2,000. There's even a documented legislative fight between 1830 and 1839 in this Toronto area to stop confining the mentally ill in regular jails. So that's why they built this. And we're going to talk about the Kirkbride plan later. The grandeur of this building is representative of the reform ideology it was built to support. It's called the moral treatment of the mentally ill, also known as environmental determinism. And this is what's really interesting about it is when we talk more about environmental determinism in Kirkbride, we will see that the reform ideology of the mentally ill was actually a form of terrain medicine. The reason, in a nutshell, they built these grand buildings that weren't super crowded, they thought that the architecture you lived in, the landscaping around you, being further away from the city, and the Toronto one is not really in the populated part of town, right? Cleaner air, all of that stuff. Crazy enough, they believed that your environment being nicer would help you be healthier. Wow. What do you know?
You know, it'd be so interesting.
We have horror movies influencing our perspective on Gothic architecture. At the time, this was like the top of the line shit. This was the nicest thing you could get. You know, they saw this as really awesome. So there's a reason why they built it this way.
Well, because it's only like, let's say 500 patients or whatever, it would be interesting to see like what kind of patients and who qualified, you know? Like were there some people that they're like, this is a hopeless case, we can't admit them? You know what I mean? That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Like if we could find some names of patients that were there, imagine that might help.
I found some distinction between the incurably insane and the people that go to these asylums. Lunatics were not necessarily thought to be incurable. Actually, they were hella optimistic that they could cure people at this time, which is why they went so hard and heavy at building these type of asylums. And also the other thing is we're looking at the beginnings of industrialization and heavy urbanization for Western culture. People started going batty, right? Like they're
let's not forget
humans in sardine cans working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. Like there was some real uptick of mental illness at this time, I think.
Let's not forget that how much things like mercury was in. So that's where that saying, you go mad as a hatter, like the people who made hats. There was all kinds of things that were environmentally fucked up. Plus the Industrial Revolution, the air was not so clean because of all the industrial pollution. So there's all kinds of environmental factors. I think we have just as many, if not more, crazy people now. It's just in a different form, and we've normalized it and called it social justice and all this other bullshit, but they're mentally ill.
Yeah, true that. Okay, so last little thing to look at, just sort of a PS to the topic of the Toronto Asylum. These walls are still standing today. They went over 2,000 feet around the property, and they were built by the patients themselves. And this was really common of the time. The patients themselves were prescribed labor as therapy. And a lot of times it's like gardening or doing the dishes or doing the laundry, cooking, depending on what their skills might be. I'm not saying whether or not that's good or bad. I don't think it was probably not as brutal as prisons, but I don't know. They did make these lunatics build this big-ass wall.
Laying brick is rehab, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, toil maxing.
Make them still feel like a normal person.
Exactly. Yeah, Owen talks about it all the time, toil max. It's good for you. It's good for your soul. So if you look, apparently, like I can't see in these photos, but apparently there's scratches like words and phrases and names and things scratched into the wall by the lunatics who built it, which is pretty cool. I bring this up
It'll
because
probably be on the inside.
The Tartaria Canada said that they just demolished it and there's nothing left. And technically this wall is still left. So, and they started building the wall in 1850s. So it's basically as old as the rest of the building.
I would also like to mention that just because these things look grandiose and they're amazing, they're still built with like wooden framework and stuff, so they do rot and get dilapidated.
And burn.
I mean, there's a whole category of genre videos that if you've never heard is really fun to watch called Urban Explorers. And these kids go and they film all these awesome locations, including insane asylums that still exist. And they go inside because they're vacant. And they just explore and show you what they actually looked like back then. And going into the crypts and the vaults where they, they keep, storing everything. It's super interesting.
Sounds fun.
It's amazing.
So the last thing, as I mentioned, this dome at the top had it's a water tank. It had 12,000 gallons of water in it. It was filled from Lake Ontario by a steam engine, and it was able to feed hot and cold running water through all the wards, even in 1850. And this was decades before most Toronto homes had anything like that. So it was kind of advanced for the time. But check this out. I found the record of Dr. Joseph Workman, who took over as superintendent in 1853. He inherited what the Dictionary of Canadian Biography calls administrative chaos, including a basement literally full of sewage from a drain the builders had botched. So, this is a brand new building and it has defective sewer systems. That is the least Tartarian detail imaginable, right? I thought these were buildings from a vanished golden age. What's up with this construction defect? Just saying.
By the way, when they call them Tartarian, are they saying this empire is like a Russian empire that conquered America, or
we have to get into
have they
that.
gotten like specific on who these people were?
Dude, what I found is that the Tartaria theory was started by a Russian guy who piggybacked off of the flamenco work, but this dude was like one of those charlatan psychic medium types. But we have to get into it. That's another topic.
It's like the Russian Wilcock.
It's literally like the 70s and 80s David Wilcock of Russia. Exactly. There you go. Okay, this is where it gets fun. We are going to look at the Provo Castle Asylum. And we're going to look at JonLevi's claims versus the historical record. I loved doing this. This was really fun because this is one of the buildings I remember from my days as a true believer. The Utah State Mental Hospital. I watched this video that we're going to show clips from when I was eating dinner when I was back in my bachelor days, because his videos are like 20 minutes long. It was perfect for putting on with a meal, and I was getting super baked back then. So I get like super high and have some dinner and watch some JonLevi videos, and I was like, whoa, Antiquitech is real. And I had never done any of my own research except watching these videos. And at the time, I considered that to be research. And I would have told someone that I was sure about the rest of the concepts that Levi talks about because I'd researched it. Just saying, I now know that was not research. I did zero research, right? I watched a YouTube video. So let's be clear. It's going to be hard not to poke a little fun at JonLevi, but I'm not doing this to hate on that guy.
I'll never forget. One of my friends sent me something from JonLevi. I watched maybe a minute and I was like, no, this is horrible.
Okay. So the video is called Forgotten Past Mental Health Hospital Exploration. I mean, check out this awesome thumbnail. Phone call. What happened? I'm sorry. 90,000 views though. So I guess that would make it a good representation of what people in this lane think about this hospital. So I made some clips and we're going to see how the claims are made in the video. This video has over 90,000 views.
I went in search of this Utah State Hospital, 1896, built for insane mental patients. And this is so out of the way. This is really far from Salt Lake City, especially in 1896.
Okay, so
why is he talking like that?
That's his aesthetic, man. He says it's so far out of the way, so far from Salt Lake City, separated from the city by swampland and the city dump. Why put it here? There's so much land.
The site was chosen in Provo and was separated from the city by a swampland and the city dump. I mean, there's so much land.
Okay, so we are showing Mr. Levi's clips to help him and anyone that's curious understand the answers to these questions he just put out there. Why is it so far away from Salt Lake City? There's so much land separated from the city by swampland and a dump. Okay, and the question it's implying is the location suspicious enough to be evidence of a cover-up of an old civilization Tartaria castle. The Utah State Hospital began as the Territorial Insane Asylum in 1885 at Provo, Utah, which at the time was a day's travel from Salt Lake City. The particular site in Provo was some 8 blocks from the nearest residence and was separated from the city by swampland and the city dump. The message this reveals about the prevailing attitudes regarding mental illness is unmistakable. This is from the current website of the hospital itself. Now, to me, putting it there makes total sense, and let me show you. We saw the same thing with the Toronto Asylum. It was built on the edge of town. Provo, the town that the asylum is basically in, is said to have had over 5,000 people in 1890. Salt Lake City, the capital of Utah, of course, was 44,000 at the time. But remember, we're talking about a capital, so the entire region is being served by this institution. It opened in 1885. Now, this is the important part. The day's travel framing, a day's travel, according to their own website. Here's the thing about that. By opening day, the question of horses and buggies was already moot. Like, I found out you could get there, it made sense to travel 40 miles with a stagecoach in a day, no problem. Horse and buggy might be a little bit more of a pain, but the Utah Southern Railroad had already extended from Salt Lake City to Provo and beyond in 1873. You got a railroad. It has a stop in Provo. And the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroads followed in the early 1880s. The asylum's dedication in 1885 on July 15th was a public party documented with reduced railroad fares that was advertised. Reduced railroad fares for attendees to come to the party. Come party at the insane asylum. There was music, refreshments. They had a grand ball for the inmates. This was actually a trend, having balls for insane people. 2 weeks later, July 31st, 1885, a newspaper called the Salt Lake Democrat reported a crowd gathering at the train depot to watch about 20 patients depart for the new institution, transferred from the old Salt Lake City Asylum by train.
Well, and if the railroads are in play, it's a moot point. Like, I mean, we see this in New York today. The real estate market in New York City is crazy. So what does that do? It just keeps raising the markets outside of it along the Hudson River because the train goes all the way up there. So people just move further and further away from the city, buy affordable housing, and commute into the city via the train. It's not rocket science. It's not a conspiracy. It happens all the time.
Yeah, but there's actually so much more about the location, so much paper trail about it. And here, this is a 1955 Utah Historical Quarterly article that I'm citing, and it has institutional records that corroborate the historical marker that is right here. This is in Provo, historical marker. And it tells the story. Let me zoom in on it. For decades after colonists settled in Provo in 1849, the Utah County Court supervised the care of those in the county who suffered from extreme poverty, mental deficiency, or mental illness. The Utah Territorial Legislature passed a bill authorizing the establishment of the insane asylum in 1880. The board of directors became responsible for choosing a site for the asylum. It included 2 former members of Provo City Council, so they had a stacked deck in getting it in their town. Utah, Salt Lake, and Davis counties campaigned to become the site of the new institution. In an effort to sway the opinion of the board of directors, Provo City offered the asylum boards $500, and Utah County offered another $2,000 to help buy the land for the buildings. With this inducement in mind, the board chose Provo in 1881 as the site for the asylum. So like the counties were trying to bribe for it. A 4-man committee selected the location for the new buildings in the foothills east of the end of Provo's Center Street, where, this is the important part, a good spring flowed from the mountain. The money from the city and county paid for the initial 40 acres of land. So there we go. That's how the land got chosen, and there's more receipts than that about it. There's extensive records of this issue in the Salt Lake City Herald from 1880 to 1881, where they're covering in the newspaper the fight between the counties for who would get to have the asylum. I found these newspaper clippings. They exist.
You can see it comes down to the money.
Comes down to the money
the
and
jobs.
The committee also liked this spot because of the spring, right? You can see it right here. Here's the asylum commissioners meeting. They met at City Hall at 10 o'clock on Thursday morning. Full attendance. The matter was to decide what county should have the asylum. It goes on to list the same counties that this historical marker is that. Did they put this historical marker there as a cover-up of Tartaria? I mean, like, the extent to which the mind boggles, right? The next clipping here talks about more of the details of how they're deciding where to put this asylum. And right here at the bottom, it says that they have visited the graves and other properties at and near Provo City, Utah County, and after consideration of the various sites, were most favorably impressed with that of land situated 1 1/4 miles due east of Provo City. A roughly drawn sketch of which is herewith presented. That's in the newspaper. The soil is a rich sandy loam, watered by 2 canals. There's also a fine spring of cold water about 300 yards east of the site in the breast of the mountain, which yields sufficient water for culinary and fire purposes. The yield of water from said spring being about 23,500 gallons per day. That's badass. This site is in full view of Provo City and surrounding country, and your committee finds that the above described land comprising about 40 acres can be obtained. There you go. So the next article clipping, this is from 1881. Work on the asylum at Provo is in progress and will continue as fast and as long as the weather will admit. There's more than that. It's all recorded in the newspapers of the time. So, not suspicious. History of Psychiatry in Utah, a book, notes that Western states at this time would distribute big institutions among competing cities. The location of state institutions in the West, I'm quoting the book now, follows a typical pattern. The prison, which furnished the most jobs for local residents, was usually given to the city with the greatest legislative clout. Carson City, Nevada, Salt Lake City, Utah, Boise, Idaho, Rawlins, Wyoming. The state insane asylum and training school vied for second and third place. Hence the location of the asylums in Provo, Reno, Blackfoot, and Evanston. End quote. Later in my research on this topic, I found that in Illinois, a very similar thing happened when Kankakee, they got the Eastern Hospital in 1877, where they had to beat out more than a dozen other towns that were offering inducements and donations to get the institution. Basically, what I'm getting at is prestigious institutions were prizes that cities were fighting over in public in the papers, which leaves a paper trail. That's the opposite of how you hide a cover up a pre-existing building, right? Why would there be all these newspaper articles about fighting over who gets to build the asylum? Levi just says, there's so much land. Why put it here in a swamp so far away from the city? And he just, I guess, expects that you're vibing with him, and he doesn't need to do any further
who's vibing
investigation.
With him. He sounds like Buffalo Bill.
We can't say that he sounds like a serial killer.
Allegedly.
I mean, you might be right, but okay. So the next point Levi makes, here we go.
The supervising architect was John Burton, who planned the building during the period from 1881 until his death. So he planned the building until his death. He starts planning in 1881. And when did he die? 1887.
So this is all factually true. He did start planning in 1881 until his death in 1887. But as we see here, this is getting framed as being suspicious, like the architect is a patsy of some sort. Exactly the same kind of framing that the Toronto Asylum, Tartaria, Canada article put forward about Howard, the architect of that place. So
you used to listen to this guy?
I was super high. I'm sorry.
We need to alert the
it.
FBI into your search history, mister.
Okay, so I'm bringing this up to show you that there's a pattern to how these claims are made. It's the same thing. Suspicious architect, young and inexperienced, or something like that. It's kind of the same deal for both.
So that's it. This 30-year-old man, John H. Burton, an American architect in Salt Lake City, dies at 30. So, in just a worthless final 7 years, just planning this.
We're cooked, bro. We're fucking cooked. This country's cooked.
It's a worthless 7 years planning, just planning. So that's the problem, right? Again, it's kind of hard for me to even pin down what Levi is trying to use this architect's story to demonstrate. It's like I said, he's just kind of vibing like, it's weird, man. Look at this old building. Okay, but let's talk about the architect, all right? We're going to add to Levi's research. We're going to help him do the research he didn't do or he didn't share. John H. Burton, the architect, was indeed quite young when he was appointed to this project, 24 years old. He was born May 28th, 1857. But his dad was a high-up Mormon church official. And this is not a claim. This is a speculation. Maybe there was a little bit of nepotism getting him in the gig because his father was an important bishopric dude with the Mormons. Now, for the worthless 7 years rhetoric, right? That just totally does not hold up. This is a website. Asylum Project's Utah State Hospital page gives the whole history of the construction down to naming specific sections of legal contracts. That's pretty good. I didn't go so far as to vet those, but it's basically what you'd expect to see. The page writes, in 1882, the architect visited asylums in Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Western New York, etc. So he's designing a multi-wing, steam-heated institutional building, and he went on a national study tour of similar buildings. I would not call that a worthless 7 years. The same institutional record shows that his plans prepared by July 1881, the tenders for those plans called for one wing soon after, and the south wing finished by 1883. So as we were showing at the beginning, the record supports the photography The photography being, here it is completed, and here is what they did first. Just this wing right here. 7 years is worthless to Levi, I think, because he never looked for the receipts.
But I think this is fascinating, Chance, because what if there's like a bigger story here in relationship to the Mormon cult and all of this and like how they got all this shit done? I mean, I think this is fascinating. If you can just separate all of this away from the Tartaria stuff, this is fucking awesome.
It's interesting history, man. Mormons are a wild subject all their own, then and now. But Burton died, as Levi pointed out, but he could have found this out in 5 minutes. It's really easy to find out. The part where he says, dies at 30, very mysterious. Yeah, that insinuation is kind of comic once you know the story, because it's not even, there's no mystery about it. He was murdered. He was shot and killed, probably in like a, slap with the glove type of duel. I just found out that he was shot and killed. I didn't go pulling the thread of why and all that. I didn't see why it mattered, but he was killed one day after his 30th birthday, shot and killed in Salt Lake City. One day after his birthday. Which
is interesting because that's a dry, the Mormons don't drink, right? So that probably would have been a dry county or whatever, or city.
I don't know if that is true back then or not, but probably true.
Well, yeah. It's
so
like,
he's a young architect.
It might have been a duel or something.
You would think, though, I point this out in my notes, if this was a genuine mystery hunting YouTube channel, would you just leave the mysterious death of the architect unchecked? He never went and found it, or he did and he didn't report on it. He just said worthless 7 years. Worthless 7 years. But Burton was not the only guy working on the project. He actually worked with a civil engineer called Don Carlos Young, who was the son of Brigham Young. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Brigham Young
University. That's you know who his is it his son or is his grandson is Steve Young, the quarterback.
Oh, no kidding?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Well, Brigham Young is America's Moses. That's what they call him, because he was the dude who led the Mormons westward when they were kicked out of Illinois and Missouri and shit for all of their shenanigans. And after Joseph Smith was killed by a mob, he was the guy that kind of took over. So he was their Moses. He led him on an exodus. The guy who took over for Burton, though, was Richard Kledding. He's a major architect in this field. He's a German dude. He designed more of the building than Burton actually did. And he also ended up building stuff like the Utah State Capitol building. We might look into Capitol buildings one day because Tartaria theory loves to say, how could they do this? It's impossible. And I haven't looked into it, but I'm starting to think that all of it is nonsense, what they point out, because I haven't found a single point in their favor in all of this work, and I've been working on it for weeks. So Kledding, this second architect, he immigrated from Germany in 1883. There's a record of this. Burton hired him the day after he stepped off the train in Salt Lake City. He was like kind of an apprentice to Burton, and then he inherited the commission from his murdered mentor, and he ends up going on to become the dean of Utah architects. I'm assuming at the university. He's just given that title. The Asylum project launched his career. So he got a lot of clout out of that, and then he got to go do a lot of stuff, and you misspoke.
Well, Steve Young is the third great, Brigham Young is his third great-grandfather. So he's a descendant of Brigham Young.
So I went looking for more about Kledding because he was kind of the real architect. He did more of the work than Burton. Not that Levi ever found out this. He goes on, or I found a University of Utah Marriott Library Special Collections has a collection called Richard Kledding Architectural Drawings. There's a finding aid for it. There's even a digitized portion, but it only covers projects from 1909 to 1913, so we can't see the Asylum. But the broader architectural collection of the library describes having selected drawings and papers of various Utah architects, including Richard Kledding. So they probably most likely have Asylum drawings on site, just not digitally. I also found that there's an 827-page book that just came out in 2025 called Richard K.A. Kledding, Utah Architect and Renaissance Man, His Life and Works, and it's advertised as a decade of dedicated research. The authors provided, it says, this is from that book, together they, Burton, and Kledding provided architectural designs for two of the territory's largest projects, the Insane Asylum in Provo and University of Deseret, or Deseret. I don't know how you pronounce that. The book describes having hundreds of photos, maps, and drawings. The publisher specifies 1,400 photos and illustrations across the 800 pages, documenting more than 450 Kledding buildings. So if the original asylum plans are anywhere that you could get in an archive or private collection or family holding or something, this book probably found them and reproduced them, given how thorough the research seems to have been. I'm not going to buy the book, but it's there. If you want to go buy this book, if this sounds interesting, Utah architecture. So this resource didn't exist in 2023 when Levi published his video. So to be fair, it's not his fault that he didn't have the book, but I don't think it would have mattered to him. I did find, this is from collections.lib.utah.edu, and it is a drawing, city of Provo in Utah, that includes the asylum. Includes the asylum right here. So here is a blueprint. We see from 1890. I was able to find this on a digitized record. This next one, you're going to love. This is the biggest argument that he makes in the whole video.
And you can tell it's old. Here in 1896, someone has planted these shrubs very young, and the road is still ungraded, unlevel. You could see that they had
Okay, so let's start with that part. The building was so old. You can just tell it's old. The shrubs are young. The road is ungraded. Okie dokie. So I can agree with the sentiment that in these photos where the building is supposed to be new, it quote unquote looks old. But that could easily just be an effect of our mind. Black and white, old-timey photography, Gothic style architecture. To all of our sort of like psychological expectations, when we see these things, we're primed to think that is old. But from these distances, full view shots of the building, far away, we can't look at the exterior in any reasonable fashion to check for weathering or signs of age. There's literally no way to conclusively say that by appearance alone, it must be old. That argument does not count.
It's not like we're looking at olive trees here, right? Like we're not looking at 3,000-year-old olive trees. I don't understand what the argument is. It's like,
it looks old, and these shrubs, they look new. So therefore,
yeah,
I don't understand
it's called
it, right?
landscaping. I don't understand well,
what
this
is what's so funny about it, man. The shrubs, which look more like young trees, are actually great evidence opposite of what he's saying. So looking at Utah State Hospital Art History from their website, it corroborates other sources we've already looked at that the grounds were developed from swampland. This is exactly one of the template things in Tartaria. It looks old, therefore it's older than they say. It's a go-to. But obviously, like we said, subjective observation based on an old-timey photo and proves nothing. But yeah, but these shrubs, if this is really a photo from 1896, for a building that opened in 1885, newer landscaping makes sense. And it actually gets better the closer you look, because there's a part in the video later where there's a historian. He calls a historian on the phone. It's great. And we're told that the first section is completed in 1885, the second in 1890, and the final piece in 1891. Where do you think landscaping follows in the progress of a building that's a multi-phase construction? Probably last, right? So if trees were planted around 1891, and this is a photo from 1896, fully reasonable that these are 5 or so year old planted trees, right? I mean, that's exactly what we're looking at. His best visual evidence.
Need to phone a friend and call up Kyle real quick. They put him live for like 5 minutes.
Well, I looked into this too, and it just depends on what kind of tree it is. Like some trees grow faster, some grow slower. But there's nothing about this photo inconsistent with the official record. And that's all that matters for this. We don't have to prove anything. We just have to see whether or not what he's saying is false, right?
You could see that they had redone the steps twice. Once in an older time period, out of stone. Otherwise, these steps were way too big. And then again, they put another set of metal stairs up. And I don't think an amphitheater is an amphitheater.
Okie dokie. So the steps he's saying are rebuilt twice. A building that stood nearly 100 years with one documented heavy remodel in the 30s would probably have had its steps and access infrastructure rebuilt more than once. Maintenance work, not weird. We're going to actually look at this amphitheater more closely in a future clip, but it's important that we to set that up, right? That's part of his thing. Now, the Mormon question is, like you were saying, actually quite interesting. Here's a little snippet of that.
So you have to recall that the Mormons arrive in the 1860s in Salt Lake City.
That is not true.
An hour away driving and probably several days on wagon. And we're told they just came out and built this up on a mountain.
Okay, so this is the worst thing he says in the video. Mormons arrive in the 1860s. We're told they just came out and built this up on a mountain. Several days wagon ride away. Wrong, wrong, wrong. So he's implying that there's a primitive Mormon society that just got there. They could never have built this. The thing is, I just told you about Brigham Young, the Mormon Moses. He led the cult on an exodus from the Midwest to Utah, where they settled in Salt Lake Valley in 1847. There is records in multiple states about this great Mormon exodus to Utah, especially where I'm from in Missouri, because Missouri as a state and the Mormon militias were basically at war for a little while before they got kicked out. So he just lied, or he never looked, or like, where the hell is he getting Mormons arrive in the 1860s? Literally, they got there in 1847. Everybody can find this out. It's like, how are you saying this? It's just bullshit. So that irks me, because at the time I probably saw this and was like, yeah, Mormons didn't get there till the 1860s, man. So I'm embarrassed. You need
to repent.
This is my repentance.
I'm just fucking
doing
with you.
it.
Hey, man.
That's what I'm doing.
You know, sometimes it's easy for people to ignore their senses because someone is catering to something that they want to be true. And
that's it.
We're all guilty of this. And what I saw in Hollywood and stuff is like, there are people you are willing to hang out with just because you know they're successful and you know they can help you if they give you an opportunity. And if they weren't in that position, you would never in a million years hang out with them. You'd just be like, get the fuck out of here, you loser. Right? You're like, why would I want to hang out with you? You're about as, interesting as the table this computer's on. But you will ignore your senses because you want to make it so bad. You got your dreams. You have all these projects you want to do. You want to change the world, whatever it is. So let's say you want to get to the bottom of matter, which is you think somebody's lying to you about the nature of the history of our country, whatever. Like, I could see how this is like fuel for that desire and how you could ignore serious concerns that I have that I won't say because I don't want you to edit it out. But, Chance is editing me. He's censoring me because, it puts the lotion in the basket.
Yeah, that is the one that just annoyed me the most, though. He literally just makes up 1860s. There's no reason to say Mormons in 1860s. You could say that Utah had a small-ish population, like a lot of Western states. 1880, the population was over 140,000. Still kind of small to have an asylum that big. But the Mormons were no more primitive than any other Americans.
I don't think people are appreciating this. They have whole fucking islands in the middle of the ocean that nobody can get to, that they have these asylums on to send people that they don't want to ever get back into the public eye again. So having something in the middle of the nowhere is not, they could never do that because it's why would they?
But the middle of nowhere isn't even true.
Yeah, I know.
There's
but
a train.
I'm just saying,
there's a train to it.
I'm just saying.
It's a town of 5,000.
Like before this, it would be on a boat, and they would take a vessel to build. They would put all this material on a vessel and get it over there and build it there, whatever they got to do. But it's the whole point is you want it isolated because you're sending people you don't ever want to see the light of day in the public eye in the grand scheme.
Now, when I put myself into the mentality of try to put myself in the head of Mormons in Utah, having just went on their great exodus, I'm sure they have a persecution complex of a sort, and that they're obviously a cult, like a really bizarre but very kind of tight-knit and hierarchical cult. I think that
based on Freemasonry, so you know they can build.
There you go. So they're probably trying to play catch up with the other settled areas of the United States, right? They want to be like, this is our land, we're just as good as you, and we've got a lot of organizational hierarchy. I mean, this is just speculative, right? But that's what I think about the Mormons at the time. This persecution complex they probably had would drive them to maybe build this grand asylum because other states that are bigger, more population, deeper established areas, like they're doing it. So we need to do it too. We need to keep up with the Joneses. Possible. That's just speculative.
Appealing to get some of that government cheddar. Look it up.
Well,
we will do this. Give us that money. We will do it even better.
Now, the less kind speculation is Mormons may have a larger percentage of dysfunctional mental illness than other groups. I mean, it's a cult. I mean, it's kind
possible,
of a weird
cult. But I've known so many Mormons, and I've worked with so many Mormons, and
they either do great or they go completely off.
I would never associate mental
I've known some great
illness with
Mormons.
them. They're very smart. They're very cunning. The only thing that I would associate that's weird about them is they believe stuff that is observably not real as the basis of everything. But other than that,
in my opinion, this is just an opinion piece, that basically denial of reality for a long period of time, it leads to later in life things like dementia and all of that. I've personally seen this in people. I do the biofield tuning thing. I think there's something to that. Not a claim. We're just thinking about,
perhaps,
we're just talking about.
But Mormons
ideas.
are not indulging in a lot of the problematic foods that the average American is indulging in. And they age well. They really do take care of themselves.
What matters is that he just flat out lied or was wrong and never checked about 1860s Mormons. That's a huge, glaring problem with the video. Okay, so here's another specific claim he makes. Let's watch it in chunks.
Another grouping of buildings, and more in the background. All the exquisite old world layout is still there.
What exquisite old world layout, John? Help me understand. He's just kind of moving his mouse around.
That shit looks like it's built in the 1970s.
Okay, so this amphitheater is legitimately kind of cool looking, and he's very concerned about it. But yeah, that earlier part, he's just sweeping his mouse along the road and saying, old world layout, grand old world layout. What the hell are you talking about? This makes no sense.
Base of what this place was like. Buildings built by the New Deal programs. So these will just all be old world buildings, redesignated.
What have you tested about that cement? Like, what have you tested? Like, what if that, you know, that they right there?
I went all the way to find where they quarried it from. I mean, there's a record of that even.
Share it if you have it.
This is huge. He's like, this is actually kind of back to the Mott and Bailey fallacy, because his track record is obviously really bad at what we've looked at so far. He's 0% correct and 0% honest. And I just have to say it. I mean, he's lying or really bad researcher, or both. But this is a huge claim, okay? Works Progress Administration, WPA, was secretly a government-led cover-up of old world architecture. He pretty much says that flat out. But then in the video, he also says, forgive me if I haven't said, I don't know. Of course I don't know. These are just my thoughts based on the narrative we are given. What else do I have? What they say and what I see. Verbatim quote, okay? So he knows he has nothing to back up this claim he just made, but for YouTube clout, backup isn't necessary. Just a sensational claim like all the New Deal constructions are old world buildings redesignated. And then you fall back to but of course, I don't know. Of course, I don't know. So
I'm
zero
actually
proof is
surprised
given.
they didn't take advantage of the amphitheater and be like, this is an ancient Greek or Roman site. you know?
No, that's what he's saying. He's saying that the amphitheater is obviously proof that it's old world, because look how old it looks. But the record is very clear that the WPA built this rec center between 1936 and 1937 as one of more than 230 New Deal public works projects in Utah. And that state was hit pretty hard by depression, 36% unemployment in 1933.
So 20th century mortar in between those rocks, people.
Yeah, it's the easiest thing to find out. Like, I mean, this is the level of insanity, is they even look at stuff from the 30s and say that it is a pre-existing building.
I didn't realize it was this bad, Chance. Like, this is actually really amazing. I'm like so glad we're doing this because, you know, I bust your balls and shit, but it's fun. But like, I just ignored this from the get-go because I listened to that for 1 second.
Yeah, you didn't realize how bad it really was.
I'm now fascinated by it. Like, this is like, holy, we've got a problem in this country. Like a serious Western culture, you know, something that needs to be addressed. Maybe we need to make asylums. Make asylums great again. Vote for me. Third term.
Well, this is the consequence of conspiracy culture. And I personally, I'm looking at this like as somebody who is I'm ex-truther. Not that I don't care about the truth or I don't talk about when there's a real conspiracy, but like I want nothing to do with whatever this is. Because the conspiracy culture is cultivating I will believe any crazy shit that is contrarian to the mainstream idea. And especially if there's something trying to hurt me and somebody to blame called they. As long as we have someone called they to blame and they are trying to hurt me, I will believe it. And that is a serious problem with so-called truther culture.
And I actually think you just addressed something really important because this almost seems to me like a drug. Like it's like a poor man's opiate, right? Because as long as you're watching Tartaria videos and getting that, you're not living in reality. You know, you're not facing the situation.
Well, you just nailed it. We're getting to I didn't realize we were going to get so deep onto mental illness itself, but it kind of fits this topic, right? Because
and if I've ever been like this, I repent. I repent.
I'm repenting right now. At the time that I was into this, I was, you could say, addict to cannabis in a way, but maybe I was just dabbling in Tartaria. I wasn't serious.
You know, as I thought of this,
user. But let me tell you this, Dylan. This is a serious dynamic, okay? Because you talked about it being like a drug. Having worked with so many people over many years at this point.
In biotuning? Biofield tuning?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I've dealt with a lot of people that either had current addiction problems or a history of addiction problems, substance abuse. And I can say conclusively in my experience that the one underlying factor that is common to all substance abuse is blame. The faculty of blaming something or somebody else for why you have a problem or your life isn't good. So in that framework, conspiracy culture is a perfect outlet that gives you an endless source of blame. Blaming they for this, blaming they for that. You know, they destroyed the old world. We used to be Kangs, whatever it is. Like, we was Kangs. It's blame. Golf is one of the last places where you can't lie to yourself. Dylan is addicted to golf.
That's why I'm playing it so much.
Yeah, it's real. It's a harsh dose of reality every hole, probably. So, okay. True. So there's a real component here with somebody to blame. Conspiracy culture has a bit of mental illness to it itself. And that's not to say there aren't real conspiracies and real nefarious shit going on. I'm not saying that, but like, why is conspiracy culture the way that it is? And willing to entertain all kinds of stuff without ever looking into it themselves because it's attractive to be able to constantly blame all the time. So here is dun construction photograph of the castle. According to the Provo City Library historical photographic record, of which there are supposedly more not digitized. If you live near Salt Lake City and you want to go to Provo and go to their City Library historical photographs collection, find us some more photographs of this being built. I would love that.
This is an invitation. Go do what Chance is saying. If you're in that, we will invite you on. I would love to have people
Show us. Yeah.
Have them come on the show.
I can't go to Salt Lake City. I can't go to Provo right now. If I could, I would be going to check out all these things. Like, maybe someday I will turn this into a book and I will go get these receipts more fully. But we have an architect, LeVar Morris. He was a landscape architecture professor at BYU, Brigham Young. The stone was quarried at Hobble Creek Canyon. There's receipts on that. I mean, what are you going to do? Like, he literally says all New Deal buildings programs are hiding Tartaria. It's so silly. It's so silly. There's tons of documentation about this. It's the 30s. So we got to just give that one up. Now, going to the next clip.
That somebody thought it was a good idea to turn that building from this into this. Insulting and stupid.
Okay, so we're
The
told
only
that
thing insulting about that was the fucking keystones. You see how sloppy that shit was?
Yeah, well, I thought this was Tartarian, old world, immaculate, high technology, hidden technology architecture. It's probably a cheap, poorly run government program. But what he's saying is they turned it into an ugly building. It was a beautiful castle. It's insulting and stupid. So what's happening here in terms of like the psychology? He's relying on the audience's emotional reaction to being told that they should feel insulted by this old building's demolition. He's telling them you should feel insulted by this, essentially. I mean, for like, high people or low IQ people, I don't know what, but like this does have an effect, I think. This is part of the appeal of the video, right? They're insulting you. So what I can tell is that this kind of downgrade was happening all over the place. We'll talk about that more with the Kirkbride stuff, part 2. But like we had these Gothic style asylums and then they started getting downgraded. I can agree with them that it sucks. Like the older version was way cooler, but it's not proof of anything more than the cheapening of standards in relation to the wealth extraction from the people by central banks in the post-Federal Reserve United States, which is what happened right before these New Deal programs became so-called necessary. Let's roll into the next clip. This is the best due diligence he does in the whole video.
I grew up in Newport, Rhode Island. I can go into homes that were made in like the 1600s. I think my friend's grandmother's house was made in 1590s or some shit like that. I remember it being worth like, it was like this tiny ass little house, wooden house, worth like over $500,000 in the early 90s. It was crazy. But even the homes of that time are gorgeous. They're still made really well, like they look beautiful. So like none of this is impressive. Like I don't understand why this is so like, why people think this is like this ancient, lost, beautiful society when it's like, no, that's actually how America looked. Yeah, and the industry places,
yes,
the mills.
19th century America is the lost civilization.
Yeah.
Like the level of crushing that we used to have
100.
not that long ago, that's the lost civilization. That's a real thing. Yeah. Okay. Here's the last clip.
And now it's gone. Let's try to find out where it went. And I do plan on calling some kind of historical society. I was doing some research on the old hospital, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions.
Okay, so I'm not going to comment on this, like the quality of
Knock it
editing
off,
of the
Mr.
video.
Hand.
I was doing some research. I
Please,
like how he puts.
don't cut this out.
like-
This is amazing.
I know. We have to because it's just funny how his like vibing with you YouTube video voice like really low and mumbly, and then when he's calling someone on the phone, he does have a different voice for an important dialogue with a professional historian. So he calls her. I think he called her at her house actually, and some sweet old biddy. She's ready to answer his questions. This is only a portion of their conversation, the part that I thought was relevant to show.
So my big question was about the original building. Typically, I do research into architecture.
No, you don't do research, John. You look at pictures and say that is fake or it's Tartaria. I mean, there's no research here. We're showing
This
you
is
what
fucking awesome.
we're showing you what research is. Research is you look into the records and you find out everything you can possibly find out, and then you decide what you think. It's not just it looks old. It looks old, and those shrubs are new. So, Tartaria.
And it was such a beautiful building. It was like a castle.
Right. It was actually designed, at least most of it. The design was started by another architect, but he ended up getting killed in Wyoming, I think it was.
So here is an example of the historian was wrong. She said she thought he got killed in Wyoming. He got killed in Salt Lake City.
By the way,
not like
this
a
is like the
problem.
last vestige of the Wild West, so everyone knows the time period.
Yeah, pretty much. It's the end of the, this is like Red Dead Redemption time.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty, I mean, so people were going to, like, you're likely to get shot if something goes wrong, some kind of altercation with somebody that's not too scrupulous. Totally. So that's what happened to the guy. Shot the day after his birthday. That sucks.
And so Richard Cletting, the architect of the state capitol, actually designed most of the building.
Mm-hmm. Oh, a big name architect.
Oops. Oh, a big name architect. So I'm proud of him knowing that Richard Cletting is an important architect.
Now, isn't he contradicting himself, or is he being sarcastic? Because didn't he say this guy had no experience, or am I missing something?
Well, at the time that he made this phone call, he evidently had no idea that Cletting was involved with the asylum, which means he went maybe to Wikipedia and found out the first guy's name and never continued to read past maybe like the first couple
straw
lines
man or whatever.
That was the straw man he was setting up. Worthless 7 years. He was just doing nothing for 7 years but planning, and then he died. So I think this is him finding out for the first time that Cletting actually designed the majority of the building. That's what it seems like. And Cletting is a very important historical architect.
The design was started by another architect, and so Richard Cletting, the architect of the state capitol.
Mm-hmm. Oh, a big name.
Big name architect.
Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In
And
the 1930s, they totally remodeled it. It was during actually the Works Progress administration, the WPA, and the idea was to kind of destigmatize the place and make it look less castle-y.
The idea was to destigmatize the place and make it look less castle-y. This was happening all around the country at that time. So they tore down those like steeple spire things and tried to modernize the look and feel of the building as much as they could, because spooky castle wasn't looking good to the public eye anymore, which is too bad. I mean, it was a cool building.
Some of us, it broke our heart that they did that because it totally ruined the building. But yeah, it was totally changed in the 1930s.
So she's pointing out something that it's actually totally normal to feel bummed that this cool old building no longer exists, right? That is something that is a real emotional validity that is sort of the spark in the whole Tartaria theory fire in a way. And
I miss it
agree.
too. I really do. I really feel like this architecture makes you more serious. It makes you more professional. It makes you have grander purpose with your life, you know, when you look at it.
Totally. Yeah, environmental determinism. If we were around stuff like this, do you think we would be as frivolous as a people? Maybe not. You know, there's something to that.
So those buildings, were well overused. So they tore the wings down in 1976, and then the last piece of the building was torn down in 1981.
oh, in 1981, it stood as long as 1981.
Yes, it did.
Oh, wow.
So
By the way,
then-
he's so fucking fake. And the fact that he's not like exposing his actual motives when talking to this woman.
it is kind of like a fake voice, and he doesn't really tell her what he thinks. That's all true. And I don't know whether or not he got permission
Yeah, did
to
he
play
inform her
her.
of two-party consent if that was a state? You know, like man.
I don't know if he did or not.
I wish I could have seen it. So there must be a lot of photos of it clear up to 1981.
Oh yeah, there's lots of photos. The Provo City Library, I think it's called their digital collection.
Mm-hmm.
We have quite a few pictures that we posted on their website, and a lot of them are of that building and the other buildings that were built over time.
Okay, so this is the reason I included this is because when he talked about the amphitheater being old world but also I don't believe in the Greek Roman thing, whatever he was saying. She just told him the exact location of where he could find photos of the construction of the amphitheater, as well as probably other photos of the building from throughout the decades. So literally he's there in person. Okay. I think he lives in this area. Like, it's not like he made a big trip. So how hard would it be for him to go from the Asylum over to the Provo City Library, where it's a public library digital collection? He could have done it that day. She told him where to go. So either he didn't do that or he did do it, but the evidence he found there did not support what he wanted to put into the video or something. But she literally gave him the answer, right? That's how I knew to go look at the Provo City Library's digital collection, and I showed you the photo of construction from the 30s of the amphitheater. So there's probably way more stuff that's not digitized. So the other thing is he complains about there not being enough photos, but we have to be, real about the fact that probably privacy policy in later years made it where it wasn't as like photographs weren't allowed because of showing patients and stuff. Like, that's not that weird that there's fewer photos of it up into the 70s.
Yeah, so I'm still waiting for his victory or his win. What was the point of posting that
just wait. Watch this.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Well,
and the other buildings.
Okay, we just got to hear this again. This is hilarious.
Over time.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. Well, I appreciate your time. You have been a great insight and resource. Thank you so much. I think the truth is self-evident. I have no further comments.
Yo, that is the Mott and Bailey.
I think the truth is self-evident. I have no further comment. Bro.
Okay.
He even said to her, he said, okay, I'll have to go check that out about the library. I don't think he did. So if he had, he would have found a lot of evidence for it really being built.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what it's like
90,000 views.
And whatever. I'm not here to judge people. I'm just trying to focus on the content. It's hard not to judge when you're that much of a caricature. It almost it makes me wonder, like, is he doing this intentionally because he knows it's like, you know what I mean? Like he's tapped an attention gold mine and he's just playing it up. In which case,
I mean, like, who acts like that in real life?
I would totally respect that if this was like kind of comedy for him and he got his rocks off by like seeing how much people bought into this and he was just fucking with him the whole time. That would be funny as hell, by the way. Like, I would respect that.
I would be into that too. That's pretty amazing. I never thought about that. Like, that actually makes sense.
And that's it, right? Because it creates that reaction, like, what the hell? And and then it's like, and all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. So, but like for me, it's like
maybe I've been doing it wrong. I was taking him seriously, and this was comedy.
That's like that's gonna look stupid on you because you actually bought it. But whatever. If the video is interesting because it made you actually find the source and like the actual evidence that debunks all of it. So it's like, why?
Well, it's exactly like McCoskey in exposing the expositions.
Yeah.
He contradicts his own theories with evidence that's in his own video.
But in any event, whether he's a joker or not, that's not the point. The point is there's a ton of people that don't think he's joking at all. And we get them in our comments.
Yeah, I know.
So whether, this is worth it for them, and maybe Asylums won't cure you, but at least having a different perspective might settle you down and calm you down. So you're like, okay, maybe I was a little hasty with this.
I don't know if they make it this far.
Probably
videos,
not, but it's
so.
okay. Some people will, and maybe some people, it's not even about us. Maybe some people who do make it this far will then use it to talk to other people about it,
Yeah. Well, the last thing I'll say about the Utah State Hospital is that the demolition is not actually weird. It's well documented. Like I mentioned before, Kennedy enacted a deinstitutionalization policy called the Community Mental Health Act in 1963, October 31st, on Halloween. Actually, kind of an interesting date to do it. 3 weeks before he was assassinated. But this was part of the national mental health care strategy shifting from centralized, massive, inhumane state psychiatric hospitals to local community-based outpatient centers. By the way, still kind of inhumane, the whole sterile clinical setting and all that. I would rather be in the castle. Even though, like I told you guys at the beginning, my grandma was in one of these castles and they messed her up. They did some terrible
But they
stuff
don't
to
look
her.
they don't look like castles on the inside. That's the problem. In the inside,
That's
they
true.
just look like every other sterile building. The castle outside, that's a facade, you know? And
It's a
that's why I
facade.
sent you that Explorer video, Urban Explorer, exploring with Josh, because he goes in a lot of asylums. For anyone who wants to look up his channel, Exploring with Josh on YouTube. And he goes in these old asylums and they're still cool, but they look modern on the inside. They don't look old world, you know? They would have had to have
Sure.
gut them and redone them all. And I don't think if they were old world, they didn't build stories like that and floors like that, you know?
Well, so the demolition, though, all that I'm trying to finish off with that is there was a serious decline of patients housed on the site already. It was an aging building, bigger than needed, no longer philosophically aligned, the architecture, like with the practice of the day. Totally makes sense that they would demo it, even though it kind of sucks. But that's it for Levi. I
By
don't
the
think we
way,
need to
I'm
take
just
him
seeing, I'm
seriously.
just looking at the notes. There's a book called The Architecture of Madness. That's where you got that from? Carla Yanni?
The next section is going to heavily focus on the book called The Architecture of Madness. And I read this book. Well, let me be more specific. I got a PDF of the book. I use an app that reads PDFs to me with an AI narrator and does a really good job. And then whenever there's something that is important to what I'm looking into, I will follow along on the actual PDF and look at the images. I have sourced a lot of good images from that book, but I got through the whole thing. It was really interesting. It was a very useful piece of research. It's like an academic book. In the establishment uses it as a reference. Coming up in the members-only part 2 of this episode, 2 asylums, both legit, practically documented to the brick. So the theory's dead and we're done. Except that was the boring half of what I found. Environmental determinism turns out to just be another way of saying terrain theory. The based 19th century doctors believed that architecture itself could help cure insanity. Light, air, symmetry, beautiful landscaping, these were all part of medicine. In part 2, we look at bigger and badder asylums, several of them in fact, mysterious fires, public dissent about these buildings, and the well-meaning Quaker doctor who made it all happen. The superintendent, like the chief doctor, and his wife were supposed to live in the center block and act like surrogate parents of an enormous artificial family. These buildings averaged $2,600 per bed, more expensive than a luxury hotel of the period. I mean, it just goes on and on. I'm not even really willing to take appeals at this point. If you want to know how and why they really built these asylums, join me for part 2 on Interverse Plus. I just want to run the big picture by everybody one more time, because we covered 2 buildings and then in the Plus extension a national movement, and most of these claims made by Tartarians need kind of like a one-line epitaph to demonstrate how they were falsified. In Toronto, built too fast? No, it ran 3 years past its own contractor's bid, and there's a planning trail reaching back to 10 years before the beginning of the construction. Was there a thin paper trail? No. A tender or a bid priced to the pound? There's architects' journals. There was a near 400-page dissertation about it. There was silver plaques from the Cornerstone that are in a museum to this day. Novice architect? No. He had 2 standing courthouses and won a competition before doing this, at least, if not more. The land issue, not even really worth bringing up. I'm just going to leave that. I mean, obviously, that's not evidence of any Tartaria. The 999 thing, that's possibly related to a lease convention based on English common law. That was cool. I don't see any problem with that. So none of those claims made any sense. It was just vibes. JonLevi, Utah Asylum. Suspicious location? Nope. It was by a spring coming down from the mountain. The counties fought about this location in the newspapers. A railroad went right to it or close to it. Was the architect suspicious because he was too young or something? He was murdered a day after turning 30. He was succeeded by his own apprentice, who became the dean of Utah Architects and just recently got an 800-page biography about all of his work. So I don't think that Levi even brought up the second architect, so his claim is pointless. It looks too old. No, that asylum, the trees agree with the construction date based on the photo date. The Mormons arrived too late to build it. No, he was off by 15 years on that one. Lying or just wrong. Was the amphitheater
lying or
built,
stupid?
or both? Was the amphitheater a one-year wonder? Was it a WPA project that is secretly covering up Tartaria with New Deal building programs? Well, there's a construction photograph in a public library collection that I found, and probably more. Levi was in the city itself and never checked, even though he was told where to go. Okay, so really that's it, man. It's over. I don't need to keep going through this. Like those things, neither of those Tartaria sources had a single leg to stand on. And then in the plus extension, we talked about the movement itself to make these buildings. The founder, Kirkbride, a professional association who kept minutes of their meetings. They published propositions by the numbers, gave how-to books with illustrations on building these exact type of asylums. There are 70 documented copies of this building structure style from the 19th century. There, we found a hostile cost auditor. We found public feuds between famous doctors about this very system. We found a newspaper printed by patients. We found so many different things. I mean, we just did 2 hours on this. The scoreboard between Tartaria and not Tartaria is not even close. There are 0 points for Tartaria. 0. And I would be honest about it. I would love to give you guys points. I want to believe. X-Files. I'm Mulder over here. That's why I'm looking so hard. Why do you guys think this? I just need help. Tell me why you think this besides vibes, right? But what's really important, I think, and we'll see if future investigations follow this trend, right? Because I'm going to try to continue on similar lines where we find a Tartaria source and we pick it apart for what it's saying versus what we can find out. Basically, these Tartaria things, Tartaria Britannica, JonLevi, etc., their articles and videos are very popular. It's like, it's genre content, and successful genre content in any genre or niche or whatever. There's usually a formula that is what is successful, and then people redo that formula and they also succeed because they found something that works. The algorithm accepts it. People are able to, people like it, what have you. And so the claims and questions given for any particular structure in the Tartaria genre seem to be taken from this template. They redo it over and over again for a different building. And actually, one of my members, Tani, who put me onto this topic in the first place, thank you. And also, you really have given me a lot of homework to do, and I don't know if I'm fully stoked about what's in front of me to keep this debunk going, but I am having fun. She noticed, made like a list of these Antiquitech Tartaria genre templates, and I think that I added a little bit of embellishment for clarity to what she wrote, but I'm quoting her here more or less, a little bit of paraphrasing. She said, "It seems most of the theory is built on incredulity, like I just don't believe it, conflicting claims, cherry picking of photographs or alleged evidence, and a lot of cognitive dissonance. So the list is, how could they do that with a rickety horse and cart? By the way, almost never true. There's more than rickety horse and cart available. They have trains, they have stagecoaches, etc. Claim 2, they had advanced travel or technology. Claim 3, these were free energy and healing centers. This is built in the middle of nowhere. It's a mystery super civilization wiped from all memory. There's no records, no blueprints, no plans, no paper trail, yada, etc. Plug in, document. They didn't have the technology to build it. They built it with lost or suppressed technology. Artists and craftsmen couldn't have possibly done that. Nobody knew how to read. Everyone died at 30. The population was too small for them to build that. They were basically peasants in straw huts. They could never have built that in X amount of years. All of these photos are fake. All of these photos have been altered. All of these photos are misdated." Followed by, "These photos prove." So they'll make those claims, and then they'll also use another photo and be like, "It proves this. Freemasons bad." That's a big one. Wikipedia says X. Wikipedia lies. Everything that goes against my idea is fake or a forgery. This old map proves. And there's probably more, but that's basically like if they can get 5 or 6 of those into a 20-minute video, if the template seems to work and they do well. And there's tons of channels doing it. So there's probably more, but that's the gist of it. Thanks, Tani. That's a great list. Very helpful. I'm going to be honest here. I could be convinced of old world buildings being in North America if there's real evidence, not speculation based on this template.
If there's good research, like, it's for me, it's really about what can you prove? And when it's like this, where it's like they can prove virtually not one point.
Yeah, if this is representative of the whole genre, and so far two out of 2 investigations into a specific part of this theory constellation has been 0 evidence. 0. I'm starting to think it's all going to be like this. And if we do another 1 or 2 of these and it's the same, I'm ready to just throw out the whole idea, right? Because it seems possible that there could have been people. I won't even say seems possible. I think the Americas were known about before. I think the Columbus story is a lie, right? But like, what was actually here? Is there any evidence of there being anything here that's more substantial, more similar to European civilization? Show me the money. Show me the money.
Yeah, and I think what's nice is like, we don't have to go too crazy, but like, as long as people keep sending you what they believe is credible evidence, and it gives you, it's like an exercise for you to think and to debunk and to say, okay, well, this is what is actually there. And you can kind of show them like, hey, let's not go to point C before establishing point A and B. And if they can establish a point A and B and it turns out that there is something weird that's not adding up, then okay, then you can give them a point. Like, I concede that's strange, that there's something to be concerned about there.
So basically, the question we started out with, is it even remotely likely that these asylums were concealing an older civilization? And basically that would require the forgery or tampering with records of these institutions, right? So let me just put it in a pile. Consider what the forgery of the records would have to include. At minimum, the legislative journals of Upper Canada and the Utah Territory, just for the first 2 we looked at, 40 years of newspapers in 2 countries, including coverage hostile to the asylums, the AMSAII, that psychiatry or alienist organization, their published propositions, the private sketchbooks of many of America's most celebrated architects, that Wilbur guy, his cost audit, read aloud to a room full of critics and published as a pamphlet in 1877, the 400-page doctoral dissertation full of references from primary sources that he went to archives to find, the 827-page 2025 book about the biography of that K, what was the last name? The architect in Utah, right? The finding aids of half a dozen archives, a literary journal printed by patients for 9 years, silver plaques sealed inside a cornerstone discovered when the Toronto Asylum was demolished. I mean, it just goes on and on. Like, all of it is internally consistent, mutually corroborating, and I never found much problem with the record. I found a few minor, I think 2 tiny discrepancies in like a number here and there, and I mentioned both of those when they came up. So with that golden book we did a couple episodes back, right? I framed the verdict as like a card counter and, trying to make a bet.
The odds.
Reading the odds, right? Yeah. This one is not even a bet. The probability that this ocean of interlocking, physically surviving documentation was fabricated to hide a lost civilization is functionally 0. It's just, that's 0% what it is.
0% chance that any of the
0%
are true.
The asylums are not the remnants of an old civilization. They are receipts of a documented civilization, ours. But think about it this way, okay? We just talked about the asylums and all that would be required to cover up the asylums. Tartaria theory itself, and even if you thought Tartaria and it's just old civilization already here, not Tartaria, unnamed, that is so much bigger of a narrative edit, so much bigger than just asylums. The mind boggles at what that would require, because all over the country, this type of documentation, bureaucratic records for all kinds of things exists. Like, who was fabricating this to hide the old civilization? I don't understand. I will say, though, the last, in closing, the real closing, to give this whole genre its due, I will say that debunking these claims does not debunk the feels, okay? And the comments section of this video will reflect that in spades, I guarantee it. The last one definitely did. The feelings are called grief and anger. They're legitimate feelings, and they get redirected towards being blamed about what our country has lost, redirected towards a dead-end theory. In reality, these are your own emotions that need to be traced back to their actual source in your real life, right? Because redirecting them to this other external stuff, blaming it on they, all it does is keep those feelings stuck inside you, and it fucks up your body. Okay. But, it's easy to blame it on this particular theory because in one century, the 19th century, our country built beautiful things, and they dedicated themselves to the idea that beauty, adornment, artistry, craftsmanship was not only worthwhile, but also part of the healing process. Awesome. Next century, we're knocking those buildings down and replacing with drywall and parking lots. It's bullshit. Easy to redirect your own internal emotional stuckness of grief and anger into that. Very easy to do. But it's yours. It's not they did it. It's your life that needs to be brought into consciousness. If you're about to get pissed off at me in the comments, I hope that helps. This applies to everybody. We all do it somewhere, somehow, throughout our life.
I think it's awesome, man, and thank you for doing it. I'm excited for it.
Thank you for listening to Inner World. To unlock the second half of this episode and access the entire archive of our research, join Interverse Plus or become a supporter on Dylan's Substack. Find links to all the ways you can join at interverseplus.com.